to have a man who lives right here in Denver, who goes over to England every year and takes the best crop circle pictures in the country or on the globe. As I told you earlier, our other man, and if you didn't hear it, Peter Kawaja had some unexpected things come up that caused him to have to not be here, and Ron was on our list anyway that we'd like to get in on this program. So without any further ado, that's what we're going to do, and he is going to give you the latest. You're going to be some of the very first to see these latest crop circle pictures, and it's a pleasure to bring to you now Ron Russell, our own member, Ron Russell. Come on, please.
Thank you.
Do you want this, or do
Yeah.
you use the, or they got you wired for the other?
I think they have.
Yeah, you're okay.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, this is fine. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Dean, for inviting me to speak. Very often, I do quite a lot of public presentations. I'm an artist, I'm a very private person. I don't like public speaking, but here I am doing it because I have a message that must be told. The message is more important than the messenger. Very often the criticism I get is that people say, well, we don't know who you are, and tell a little something of yourself. So this is the work I'm doing now. I'm an artist. I make my living for 35 years as an artist. I've worked for Star Trek Next Generation, NASA, and I do cosmic kind of work. And an artist is a subversive because you see up in the corner there I've put the Pleiades unbeknownst to the client who bought. That's the cleverness of the artist. Go look at those cathedrals in Europe. They're full of the artist's little messages. Could we have a diminution of the lights? Is that possible? Because this is a visual show, and I want you to be able to see the screen clearly. Could we have the next slide, please? I should also mention Colin Andrews, whom I've studied with for years, is the world's foremost researcher in the crop circle phenomena since the mid-70s. And his recent talk at Glastonbury Symposium is on video and will be shown here at 1 o'clock on this monitor for those of you who want it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Colin is closer to anybody and has better connections actually than any other researcher. So we're privileged to have that tape. Doe Kelly brought that from Glastonbury, and Doe has a booth over there with photos and t-shirts and various things that are worth your looking at.
Can you have more of the lights down, please?
That's a good idea. They're right in my eyes. I don't know how to control lights from. Thank you. That's fine with me if it's okay with you. All right. What I'm going to do is show you. I've been researching this for about 6 years now, and I, as an artist, first saw pictures of crop circles in the New York Times, which I guess slipped through their editorial censorship at that. And I was like, bing! It woke me up. Because if it was true, this is art of a different kind than we're used to. We think art's made by human beings. Well, maybe not necessarily. Maybe there's some spiritual influence that's quite profound, or maybe it's ET, or maybe it's elementals and devic forces in the great biosphere of the Earth. Well, I don't have those answers after 6 years, and Colin Andrews, after almost 20 years, he doesn't have them either. So we don't know who's doing it, but we can speculate. We don't even know why, but we can speculate. So the speculation I'm going to try to keep to a minimum and try to give you the pictures and the facts as I know them and have experienced them. Very early on in this season, and I'm going to show you 1996 up to the availability of the images, because 96 is still happening. The formations that I'm going to show you are, some of them are still in the fields in England and in America and in Romania and all over the world. Because the season is still growing, the harvest is not completely taken place. So then I'll finish up with a few zingers from the past that might bring smiles to your face, because they become sort of icons in our culture. This is oilseed rape, from which canola oil comes. And the very early formations, that's an early crop in England. And early formations occur in oilseed rape, and then barley, and then wheat. And very occasionally they appear in other kinds of substance like heather or field grass, range grass, snow, ice. And so this is an example of oilseed rape. Next slide. This is in Hampshire, and as is this. Oilseed rape is very difficult to hoax. It's a very strong, tough plant, similar to celery, and it takes a massive amount of force to lay it down. Next slide. And if a fabrication, a human fabrication, we have several kinds of crop circles going on. We have something made by paranormal intelligence, and then we have some few that are fakes made by human beings for whatever their motive is. They don't interest me, and I don't need to talk about them, but if you have particular questions about that, you're certainly welcome to ask. And by the way, if you have short questions that aren't too deeply philosophical, please ask them during the presentation, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end, I think, for questions and answers also. But I don't mind being interrupted, so just put your hand up. Oilseed rape has a flower, and when the formation goes down in rapeseed, the flowers are never hurt. Well, I mean, if a mechanical force was used, like a board or a roller or some contrivance, you're going to crush the flowers too, and the bloom on the plant. But in a genuine formation, we don't have damage to the plant that's notable. And next slide. And in fact, we have what seems to be common through most of the formations is a source of energy hits the plant that causes it to soften, and then another force perhaps bends it in a certain pattern. Now, all of this could be meteorological, like an ion plasma vortex, which has been thought of by the scientists the few scientists who study this phenomenon. It's mostly artists that study it, because we don't have anything to lose. But the scientists, they say, well, we'll lose our grants, or our colleagues will humiliate us and we'll never get our promotion. See, so science has become corrupted, but well, frankly, art's corrupted too, so we better leave that alone. Some energy hits it. Now, we have found there's a little whirlwinds and little vortexes that seem to come from the ionosphere or even further out that can zip through our atmosphere and affect the crop, and it leaves a mess. But it has the same physiological signature as the crop circles. So we think there's a natural phenomenon that's co-opted by some intelligence. Who it is, we don't know, and there's many different, it seems like many different tribes at work. So there is a natural phenomenon, and then there is the co-option of that phenomenon by an intelligence to leave a glyph. That's what we're interested in. Who is that intelligence? What are they saying? What should we do about it? And I don't think that we should totally ignore it. It seems very important to me because it's a manifest mark. It's there. It can be studied. True, it dissipates over a period of weeks or days or whatever, but it needs to be studied, and but it doesn't quite fit in our reality. Our consensus tends to ignore it. Now, maybe with this hoopla about, oh, they found little dinky life form, maybe, on Mars rocks, maybe, that will... No, this is planted information, folks. This is to raise the awareness of the populace to this possibility, and I'm all for it. Except the bottom line is they're already here. So, next slide. So, 1996, the formations in spring, in May, June, start out simple. We found this as ringed formations, simple circles. This near Ropley in Hampshire County. Next slide. That was in barley. This is in wheat, and it's near Newbury in Hampshire. Well, the tram lines, the ruled lines in the field are where the tractor goes down, and they're typically 40 to 80 feet apart. So a circle like this would be 120 feet or something like that. And when there are notable sizes, I'll tell them to you. Most of them range from, we have crop circles from 6 inches. The largest formation we have ever recorded came this year at Etchellhampton, 8/10 of a mile in length. Complex series of circles and pathways with a mysterious glyph. I'll show you the glyph. I do not yet have a slide. As I say, it's still in the field. I don't have a slide of that entire formation, but I will for the IANS conference. Again, a question? People have walked around it. This is not new because you can see the lines running through the formation are where people have walked.
So they've actually killed it to turn it yellow?
Well, it's pressed down and yeah, it's been killed. The formation, the sort of a grail quest of the crop circle researcher is to get there right away. If you get there 3 weeks later, and I'll show you some examples, it gets really trashed out. And I mean, thousands of people visit these. We had one in Ohio that was visited by over 8,000 people. I'll show you a picture of that in a few minutes. Next slide. So they start out simple, but already you can see there's a growing complexity. This was in Hampshire also. Next, please. Most of these occur in southwest England, although this year they're scattered all over the counties of southern England. We do have them in Scotland, but they're more rare, and Yorkshire and the northern counties, they're more rare. A little one in Hampshire. Next slide. Yeah, curious. Now, I never went into these. These are far from my home base, but I fly with Busty Taylor, who has been a presenter at the INS conference before, and he's become a good friend, and he's a great pilot. He's a very intuitive fellow, and we fly sometimes not quite knowing where we are, and just going, but there's a crop circle. Well, it's like we were almost led to it. And in fact, Busty has on a number of occasions, has looked at a formation and just kind of idly thought, well, gee, if it was just one more circle there, it would be a Christian cross instead of a Celtic cross. And then the next day, there's that other circle. So there seems to be an interactive possibility here with whatever the agency is that causes this. And that's very interesting, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. Next, please. So early on in this year, we had simple, the other formations I showed you, a couple of those were kind of cute, and here an echo of the Celtic cross formation with a peculiar lay. Next, please. This at King's Clear, near the Andrew Lloyd Webber estate, and if some of you saw my presentation last year, you will remember that Andrew Lloyd Webber had a big formation on it and he has a huge security system, and they showed the videotape, and all of a sudden in the next frame it was there. So he was quite upset about it, but we think that perhaps somebody is talking to him also. Farmer would, even though you can see a lot of people have been in here, the farmer would not let me in that formation. Even though I tried to bribe him with money, it didn't work. So, next, please.
Other circle made at the same time as the independent.
When we go into a formation, we see some evidence that one part may have come down first, and then another comes down on top of it. And sometimes they're even like braided. Sometimes you can't even walk into the formation without destroying the weaving effect that has taken place because the bend is higher than the ground. Most typically, however, the bend is by the ground, and the first growth node gets swollen. Sometimes it's the second one gets swollen. Sometimes they are exploded. Perhaps you've seen some of the coverage on sightings or encounters or whatever. And Dr. Levengood is showing very good examples of that. And that indicates that the grass has been hit by an energy similar to perhaps a microwave, pulsed microwave energy, which has heated it up. And then some other force has caused it to swirl in just the right way and leave a pattern for us to think about. Next, please. Sometimes the bends in the crop are up at a higher level than the ground also. Next. Things started getting kind of interesting when more complex and individual glyphs began appearing. There's people in that, as you can see. This by East Kennet. It was really quite accessible and appeared in the first week of July. And we enjoyed this one very much this year. Next, please. Another shot of it. Now, to me, I've already told you I'm an artist, and I have a bias, an aesthetic bias. And if I were going to make something, I would want to make it kind of as perfect as I could, with really round and nice. And when they're not that way, it kind of rankles me. It's like I'm thinking, well, what? I mean, if the gods are doing this and giving us these things, aren't they giving us perfection? Or is it within the imperfection that they show us there is a secret perfection? That's possible too. Next, please. Yeah, this was early on this year. We've never had anything like this. Sort of looks like they're talking about germination of a seed. Yeah. Well, we have really no more information than you do right now seeing this for the first time as to what they mean. I mean, they don't come with a set of instructions, and they're just there. And it's all of us who have been in these formations and studied them have we think we're being watched. We get that idea that it's not, that there's something that might indeed be observing us in whatever this interesting space is.
Has there ever been anyone that saw one happen?
Yes, we have about 80 eyewitnesses. Now, I'm going out on a limb and saying there's well over 10,000 of these formations, but in our data bank we have maybe about 5,000. But worldwide, probably the number is closer to 50,000. But there have been in Britain about 80 eyewitnesses. Colin Andrews has talked to and gotten the stories from about 40 of those, and they report various phenomena like there was a ball of light floated in the field, or there was a dome of light, or there was a beam of light, or there was a beam of dark energy, or there was a funny sound, or there was no sound. You see, it's all over the board. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and that it's not really consistent for our minds. We have to jump through a lot of hoops and realize that whoever's doing this is doing this in a very brilliant fashion and not necessarily repeating the same process every time. So there is quite a variety of eyewitness testimony, but almost all the testimony reports it's down in a few seconds to perhaps as long as 15 seconds in a complex formation that they watch this dark light thing going on, and then it's there. We think it's being done from some agency from above, but it also seems to be in a cooperative arrangement with some agency from below. It's very important to realize that there are water, underground water where these are. That's dowsable water, and very often the water is gone after the formation. So it seems like, to be simplistic, maybe ET is working with the elementals. There's that possibility. That's a little simplistic. Next, please. Because honestly, we don't know. See, now, we see something like this. This is at the Overton Junction in Wiltshire near Alton Barnes. I saw this and I drove by that road 10 times and I could not stop and go into it. I don't know. I'm a little embarrassed about that. I don't understand why that is. Other friends of mine went into this and said this was one of the best ones they've ever been in because it had a great playful energy. For me, it was like aesthetically jarring, and I just didn't want to go into it. But, it's very peculiar. We all have our individual reactions, and I'm only too human. What's interesting is you can see there is a pulsation, a pulse that's visible along here as if it pop, 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 you know, like that. We've seen that quite a lot of times. And when somebody goes to fake something, they don't fake that pulse. So I'm not saying that I thought this was a fake. I just didn't go into it. I went into plenty of others, but not this one. Next, please. Now, this is an example of real good aesthetics to me. This one, I can say, oh, well, you know, something's talking to us. Something's giving us something profound. This is 648 feet in length, 12 main big circles, and it had a total of 98 or 100 circles, something like that. It was astonishing, astonishing. No human being ever claimed this. The newspapers in the west of England are now, when they show pictures of this to inform the public, they never get in the major newspapers, but it gets in the regionals. They are now saying E.T. is tricking us again. Now, they used to say Doug and Dave, two guys from the bar, you know, went out with and faked all the circles in the world. And now they're not saying that anymore. Now they're saying E.T. So there's been a shift in the public, conditioning? Yeah, something like that. Next slide, please. There's a prospect of that formation as we see it from the road, driving by Alton Barns. This is the famous East Field, Woodborough Hill. The major St. Michael ley line runs directly through the hill and beyond, all the way across Europe. And that's dowsable and it's powerful. And it runs through Avebury and Stonehenge, and it's very interesting. These lines of energy are still strongly in operation here in this part of England. And these formations appear yearly in this field. In fact, on the hill, the field is ringed by hills, of which are sites of ancient habitation some 8,000 years ago. That's before the pyramids of Egypt. That all around this field are these little hills, and people do sky watches there at this time of year nightly because there's so much phenomenon. The phenomenon from little amber balls of light, white balls, red, little things that move around, perhaps fairy spirits or elementals, and sometimes ships, and sometimes discarnate entities that you can sense. And it's quite an amazing place. It's like the curtain that separates our material reality, the one we're used to and incarnate in, from a spiritual reality that we dream about sometimes. That curtain is very thin in southern England and torn in places, and there's a leak through. Very exciting. I mean, I really recommend it. It's just a delightful place.
Is that cliff oriented to the ley line?
Yes, that's right, running right smack dab down this energy line. The energy line is not always the same as the ley line. It'll weave a little and change with time and season. But when you take a map, it's generally right along here. Next, please. Now there's just another view of this. It's not quite that. It's more east-west, but not quite. I have a privilege of being a friend of a great man who is the Dalai Lama's doctor. And this Tibetan, this little fellow, is a healer. He's an MD. He doesn't practice any allopathy. He only deals in energy. And he keeps the Dalai Lama running and this other spiritual hierarchy that's in exile from Tibet. I brought him into this formation, And he said that this area was the most powerful, so we did a little meditation there. And he said after the meditation, he said, well, this is really quite interesting. I'm very glad you brought me here. We don't need to go to Tibet anymore. We can just come to this place because the clarity is here. You don't have to go 14,000 feet in the Himalayas to get that clarity. And then he gave us another interesting clue. He said, well, the energy here is really interesting. You should collect all the seed heads. It's in the seed heads. Now, we have tried to do that. I had to give them all up at the customs, as yeah. So we have tried, and we actually kind of need some funding for that. That's sort of a big effort, and we have to pay the farmer and all that, pay collectors. And yet we don't know what we're collecting. But Dr. Levengood has found genetic changes in the seeds that are affected by the energy that causes the glyph to form. Next, please.
Where's this glyph located?
This is Eastfield, Alton Barnes, Wiltshire, southern England. And this appeared in late June in Barley. I got there in July, and this was the condition of it when I took my first flight the day after I arrived, visited by well over 1,000 people who just got wind of it because there hadn't been press coverage of it to speak of. But people came from all over because this was one of the ones they could feel it wasn't a trick, wasn't a fake. I mean, there is that problem.
This one has an added circle.
Yes, that's a hoax. The added circle, we caught some kids doing that. So, this is a part of the problem, you know. It's not a pure thing. You have to kind of be able, you know, to move around and.
How long do they last?
Well, as you see, this is barely lasting. It's pretty trashed out. Next slide. Generally, they last as long as the crop lasts, and also depending upon how many people go through it. Now, people are very funny. They'll bring their dogs and kids, and they'll have a picnic there. What? Well, I don't know. I mean, who am I to say? And then the kids and dogs run around, and so the very pretty controlled swirl patterns, and they get messed up real quick. So that's why the researcher who wants, you know, to get the information and get the knowledge has to get there pretty quick before the hordes. And man, I'm not speaking of huge hordes. It's really not that many people, but it does add up to thousands over weeks of time. This was one of my favorites this year. This little dumbbell formation appeared at Roundway. None of us spent any time at all here. We didn't like this, but we loved this. It's an intuitive thing. You have to kind of just sense it. I didn't even bring dowsing rods into this. I just went with my feeling. We sat down. We found all kinds of amazing, wonderful energies. And you try to be serious and do like, okay, I'm going to be a scientist, and I have to record all this, but you can't do it because you're giggling. So there's a kind of an enchantment that happens that is, what can I say? It's wonderful. It's changed my life. Probably changed my brain cells because I've been in so many of these. Next, please. Yeah, but it's a change for the better. Here's a detail in that little circle where the path the lay has run down, and then there's the swirl, the clockwise swirl of the crop in the little circle has bent around the rock The rock is cleaved neatly in half by the force, and there is a wrapping of crop zipped around, and then it bends around. Just little details like this are part of the delight of this search. Next, please. Some of you may recognize this as possibly a semantic where you can take a plate of sand and a violin bow with rosin and on the edge of a glass or tin, and it creates a vibration and leaves a pattern. This is a peculiar crop formation. We haven't really seen this before. This came this year at Goodworth Clatford in Hampshire County. Lovely. Next slide. The crop was not swirled, it was radially laid in this peculiar pattern. It's in barley. The farmer would not let anyone into it, period. He had a guard posted there. Next, please. That's not a very good resolution, but it gives you an idea. A pole shot by Busty Taylor. Pole shot meaning we have a 20-foot aluminum pole with a camera up on top with the self-timer, and you hold it and you think, God, I hope I got this. Click. And sometimes you get it. Next, please. Now, in all the years, we've never seen anything like this either. We had a lot of new ones, just as you think, well, they've done everything they can, dumbbells and pictograms and mandala forms. Well, all of a sudden we get new things. So there's no shortage of imagination with the agency, you see, that causes this. This appeared at East Oakley in Hampshire County, northern Hampshire. Next slide. Now, this part was human-made by some kids. The thing was just this with these very thin rings, but some kids came out and thought that they'd have a fun time. Well, that's part of the situation. That's in Hampshire also. Next, please. Curiously, as sacred as Somerset is, and we know Somerset's the home of Glastonbury, and the young Christ came with his uncle Joseph Arimathea and his mother to Glastonbury. It's in all the local legends. King Arthur, and I mean all this stuff in Glastonbury. This appeared very near in Yeovil, near that. It's one of Somerset County's only crop formations. Next slide. And again, you see the repeated pattern. For years we have this Celtic cross in all kinds of variations. Some of them just made with circles, some with lines. Again, we have this, or it could be a medicine wheel, see, from Native American, but a similar kind of thing. The four directions. So this was said to be lovely. I never visited this. I photographed it on my last day before I came back to Denver. Not precisely, no. They're very seldom. Occasionally they'll be compass oriented. And then the compass itself is different than true north. But very often, the orientation along an axis will point to other sacred sites. That's the key, too. We think these are new sacred sites in deference to Stonehenge, Avebury, and Glastonbury, and the many, many wonderful sacred sites in England that are ancient sacred sites. Next, please. And in fact, you know, some of them really look like floor plans of churches or the floor plan of a stone circle. Yes, it's very interesting. And the diameters are very similar to the diameter of Stonehenge, and we've had, England has about 200 remaining stone circles. Stonehenge you know about, and I'll show you pictures in a few minutes.
The little bitty tails there, the two that go off the center of that one, are they,
Oh, here?
are they part of the original formation, or are they?
The circle was, but people walked to it and created the path, see? And this circle was, and then they walk into it. So it's been there for 4 or 5 days, and then a lot of local people say, oh, good, we got a crop circle, and let's go visit it and have a picnic or something. See? Very interesting, yeah. Next, please. I have a little bit better shot of this next. It is curious that many of these appear near power lines. Some of them directly under power lines. Some, in fact, have been under a power line and the formation is split in half, and half the circle cut with a straight line will be over here, and the other half will be over here, as if the energy were split like that. And very often when flocks of birds, we have all observed this, flock of birds will come and they will not fly over the formation, they will split and fly around it. And I have been in the plane with Busty photographing a plan view directly overhead. It wasn't this formation, it was another one, but it's immaterial. And all the instruments go off. And the pilots, they don't like that when that happens. Neither did the passenger. And it quickly recovers because you're out of the airspace that's directly over the formation. So we suspect there's some kind of cylinder of some kind of energy that's above the formation. Next, please. Okay, that's Stonehenge. You know, almost everybody in the civilized world knows what Stonehenge is. And to have a formation of this magnitude appear right by Stonehenge and of seemingly a similar mass is very interesting. These are tumuli, or a singular tumulus, but they're all around. They used to call them Saxon burial mounds, and they're definitely not that. Nobody buried there, and the Saxons didn't make them. They're markers from the megalithic era, or some of them may have been added in the Bronze era. But the megalithic culture is pre-Celtic, and these are people that settled here at least 6,000 BC, 7,000 BC, and started doing something. Stonehenge is maybe 4.5 to 5,000 years old. But that's the youngest of the stone circles. The other ones are much older. And they have a great deal of power. Stonehenge is laid out very poorly. The Heritage Trust, or whoever's in charge, does not have a clue how to do it right. And we're hoping someday that gets changed. But here this formation appeared. Next slide. I have several slides of it because it's so important. It's 915 feet long, if you take it that way. It appears to be similar to a Julia set, which is like that edge of the Mandelbrot where order breaks down and chaos replicates itself into infinite patterns of itself. And although it's not quite that, it's a little different than that. The newspapers called it a centipede. And you know, I can see there's a curious articulation in the whatever the, well, I don't think it's a centipede, but in fact, I'm uncertain about naming it at all. It kind of is nice not to name it. And we'll just call it Stonehenge Formation, you know, and it appeared, I was on the phone with Busty Taylor, and he said, well, Ron, the funniest thing is I just talked to a pilot who flew over Stonehenge. He landed at Thruxton Air Base, not too far away, 5 minutes away, picked up a passenger, flew back, and the formation was there. But when he flew over it 30 minutes before, it wasn't there. And there are all kinds of guards that watch this area. I mean, you have to understand the nature of human beings is if you're left alone, they'll go and they want to chip a little piece of the rock to put on in their pocket or something, you know, nonsense like that. And so there are guards there. There's thousands of people daily at Stonehenge, thousands of people on this, I believe that's the A303 highway. Nobody saw anything. It happened during the day. From in the space between 5:30 p.m. and 6, which is not even sunset time. This England, you know, is an island in the Atlantic, is a northern latitude, and it doesn't get dark at night till about 11. So, yeah, that is unusual. Most of them appear at night, but this one appeared evidently during the day. Now, on the video, Colin, who has done tremendous amount of research, and I have not even seen this video myself. He will talk about details of this formation and his, I believe, talking with the guards and such. But this is the second in the series of massive formation, that one at East Field that I showed you, which sort of looks like two sine waves, or a sine and a cosine wave. People popularly call it the DNA, but I don't think that's what it is. You can get in trouble with naming things. These are bigger than the names that we would want to append to them, and I don't want to reduce them by calling them. Let me see, what was this? Doe Kelly, are you in the audience? 151 circles. Thank you. I knew that, but Next slide, yes.
Do you think some computer genius is using something like HARP or some of these satellites in the air with laser?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of theories about that, and I don't think that. First of all, the military mind, the covert mind, they're not good artists. I mean, right? An artist needs freedom, and an artist detests fascism, and this secret stuff that's going on is fascistic. 10 minutes? Have I talked that long? Oh, thank you. I got a rush. Next slide. Yeah, I'll show you another view of that. This was on the second morning, where already there is some recovery in the formation. The next slide. This is on the fifth day, where there's quite a bit of phototropic recovery. And there haven't been that many people in there because it didn't hit the press quite yet. The farmer was absolutely beside himself when this happened. He was going to go in and cut it out so no one could go in it. Then one of our good researchers, Mary Bennett, who is author of The Only Planet of Choice, it's a very good book, might be even on the book tables here, she talked the farmer into it and said, look, let's make lemonade out of a lemon. This is lost to you, make it again. Set up a little table, charge £2. The guy's made a fortune. It's thousands of people came in here, paid £2 a piece. He's happy as can be, and he's now saying, oh, it's absolutely genuine, you know. Well, we think it is. Next, please. You know, I think the largest of these circles in diameter is about 80 feet. And then they go down to about a foot or so for the tiniest one. And the details in the very tiny circles are astonishing. I'll show you just a couple. Next. Next. Okay, here's this famous gap-seeking effect, the swirl, and all of those were clockwise. In fact, all of these fabulous giant formations that appeared this year were clockwise swirls. But the crop tends to find a little opening where the seed drill missed, and there was a little opening, and it goes zip and sends the crop right up the opening. Next, please. That happens here. It happened all over. Splaying up on the sides is a very good example of something that's not done by a contrived mechanical method. Next, please. Just more details. This was 151 circles. It was like a lexicon of crop circles with every center being different. Some of them baskets, some of them radials, some of them standing tufts. Next, please.
This would be available in a book, these pictures?
Yes, I have some pictures. I have made color Xeroxes of good quality of these, and they'll be available at Doe's table near where that red light is shining over there. Next, please.
Probably have some questions. We want to get through them all, don't we?
Yeah, we do. This is the most massive we've ever had. It's about 1,000 feet in diameter with 194 circles. We've never on the planet seen anything like this. Now, we just call it Windmill Hill because that's, again, on the ley line. It appeared in that area of Windmill Hill, very ancient sacred site. And there are some people in there, and there are some standing stalks, and again, an immense variety. The largest crop formation, mass crop formation that we've ever had, actually. 194 circles, all clockwise. This is not a good slide, but I'm getting a good slide, so INS, I'll have more detailed slides of this. Next, please. Example of the beauty of the swirls of these formations. Next. I'm going to have to go quick. We love details like, aesthetically I do, where we have little arrangements. Next, please.
Have any of these appeared on untilled soil?
Yes, in prairie grass, in Kansas, in Nebraska, yes.
What about sand?
Yes, in sand, that's true. In snow, in ice, but most of them, the canvas that is most appreciated seems to be the wheat and fields of cereal grain, and that the energies are going into our food supply. Think about that. Very interesting. This was part of a formation that went 0.8 of a mile near Etchelhampton Devizes in Wiltshire. We have no idea what these glyphs mean, but there have been quite a few this year with teardrop shapes and curious triangular glyphs. We don't, I mean, you're as good as any of us to try and decipher this. Next, please. You know, I don't even want to talk about this one. Next, please. This is human-made. My friends, Dr. Joachim Koch and Hans-Jürgen Kaiborg, have a new book out. This is a communication device, intentional on their part, to the circle makers, and this appeared at the back of Woodborough Hill, and is not a fake. It's a human-made communication device. Next, please. A fake is something tend to want to deceive us. That wasn't the intention there. This is one that we created, or helped to create, by meditating. I was fortunate enough in 1992 to be part of the CSETI team that we meditated, and we right there agreed upon this shape and held it in our minds and projected it up to the circle makers, whoever they are, and the next day it was there in the field. The next day. So there is an interactive thing going on. It's like we're just at the edges of this. Next, please. Ohio, 95 feet in diameter. No tram lines in America for the most part because the fields are so big they spray aerially. But of course, people have walked in here. Thousands of people went into this, and this is a police tape around it. Caution, crime scene. I don't know. Next, please. This, these are low resolution because I pulled them off the net. By the way, there's a site on the net called Crop Circle Connector. Just type it into your search engine. Those of you who want to follow this, it's the fantastic site. Chehalis, Washington. I'll be getting slides of this shortly. Next, please. We got to go quick here. This, thanks to Marge Kirsten, gave me, this was in Laguna Canyon in California early this year in weeds by a construction site. But it's a sacred area, and a lot of anomalous lights have been seen here for years. And this is very reminiscent of Chumash Indian designs that are on the walls. So we don't know. It's just another example from the United States. Next, please. There were magical bends in this one. British Columbia. Next, please. West Bohemia. I don't have photos, but I took these off the net from a site in Romania, of all places. Amazing, this internet, I got to tell you. Next, please. Moravia. Next, please. Again, West Bohemia. Next, please. Now, why the photographer stood behind a tree, that's I don't know. But anyway, you can see that's his glyph, and here's a graphic of it. Next. I got the jaggies in this one. I don't know how to process it any better. Next. This in Norway. This one in Norway. Next. Now here's some old favorites, because I know I have like, what, 1 minute? Oh, golly. Any questions, answer them now, and we'll just cycle through these. These are old friends from the past. All I have from '96 I've shown. Go ahead and cycle through them. What other questions are burning in your mind? Yes, all of the genuine formations are pregnant with sacred geometric ratios, proportions. The phi ratio is prominent. The fakes never live up to it. They just don't. And that's why I said we think some of, yeah, that's a woo. The fakes, they don't craft it. And even the eccentricities of a formation where the circle may be a little flat on one side turns out to have geometrical significance. Yeah, that's a great question. Any other?
What about subsequent years? How are the yields?
You mean in the crop that's affected? Well, that crop gets plowed under and it germinates early because it's been seeded early. And it grows a little bit differently. It is more leafy. We're getting genetic changes and we're not paying close attention to this. I've tried to interest University of California where I went, and I can't get it. Science has a closed mind. It's become scientism. It's a very, very sad thing that's happened here.
Let me pose a question. There's been a thought that there is a world subconscious that may react to man. Would this be some expression from that
expect?
Well, that's a good question. Gosh, yeah, that's as much possible as anything else. Yeah, that it could be the mind of the planet itself, or the great mother biosphere, or something might be giving this. Trouble is, we've seen an ET connection. We've seen ships, you know, and very often, in fact, the vicar at Marlborough reported seeing a craft emit a beam of light, and he was astonished, and he went over. This is a vicar of the Anglican Church. They're not given to UFO stuff at all. And he went over, and there was a crop circle. And it hadn't been there before. So there's a connection from up above, and we're certain there's a connection from underneath too.
Ron, any animals ever get nervous in those circles?
Oh, dreadful. Yeah, the animals don't go in to these. Deer, hedgehogs, all kinds of animals will not go into the circles. A trained dog who is a pet might go in, but they become agitated, they whine, they throw up. You don't take animals in here. But to give you an idea of the benevolence, I'm putting that evaluation onto it. The benevolence of this energy, no animal's hurt. Nothing is hurt. The plants are not harmed. They grow. There's no dead insects, no dead animals. So you see, it's very interesting that way.
Would you test the polarity inside?
Yeah, we take occasionally magnetometers. We've taken scintillation counters. We get low alpha emission that are higher in the circle. We get magnetic readings that are higher. We get static electric readings that are lower. Dowsing there seems to be a radiation. You get bands going out across the field